Have you ever had a gut feeling so strong, so chillingly specific, that it stopped you in your tracks? A feeling that whispered a warning you couldn't ignore, even if you couldn't explain it? Today, I'm going to share a story that will make you question the boundaries of intuition and fate. It's the story of Elena, a woman whose premonition was so powerful it might have saved her life, but in a way she never ever expected. This all began a few summers ago. Elena and her husband Mark were living the dream. They planned this epic road trip through the breathtaking mountains of Vermont for months. They had their big, comfortable RV and hitched to the back their prized motorcycle. The plan was simple: spend their days exploring those winding forest roads, discovering quiet lakeside routes, and just soaking in the peace and beauty of it all. For the first part of their trip, everything was perfect. The air was crisp, the scenery was stunning, and they felt a million miles away from the stresses of everyday life. It was pure, simple happiness. Until one morning, when everything changed. The sun was shining, birds were chirping. It seemed like just another perfect day in paradise. They were getting ready to take the motorcycle out for a ride, a route they'd been looking forward to all week. Mark was already getting his gear on, excited to hit the road. But as Elena went to grab her helmet, she froze. It wasn't a choice. It was a physical reaction. A crushing weight suddenly settled in her chest, so heavy she could barely breathe. A wave of pure, undiluted dread washed over her, and a voice in her head, clear as day, screamed, "No." She looked at Mark, her eyes wide with a fear he didn't understand. "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I can't get on that bike today." Mark, of course, was confused. The weather was perfect, the bike was ready, and this was what they came here to do. He asked her what was wrong. Was she feeling sick? Did she not like the planned route? Elena just shook her head, struggling to put the terrifying feeling into words. Finally, she managed to say, "Something terrible is going to happen. I can see it." Her voice was trembling. "A truck. A big truck. It's going to cut us off. We'll be badly hurt. I can feel it." Now, Mark loved his wife, but he was a practical man. He knew Elena had these strange flashes of intuition from time to time. Little things like knowing who was calling before the phone rang, or having a weird feeling about taking a certain street. He'd always chalked it up to coincidence. A premonition about a specific violent crash. That was a step too far. He tried to reason with her, telling her it was just a bad dream or a weird mood, but Elena was immovable. The terror was etched on her face. She was adamant. There was no way she was getting on that motorcycle, so Mark made a decision. He wasn't going to let a bad feeling ruin his day. Frustrated, but also a little concerned, he told her he'd go for a ride by himself, just for a couple of hours. He'd be careful. Elena didn't argue. She just watched him go, and as the sound of the motorcycle faded into the distance, she retreated into the RV, wrapping her arms around herself, trembling. The horrible feeling didn't go away. In fact, it stayed with her. A heavy, suffocating blanket of anxiety. Every minute he was gone felt like an hour. Every distant sound of a vehicle made her heart leap into her throat. Hours later, Mark returned. Elena heard the RV door open and looked up. The man who walked in was not the same one who had left that morning. He was pale, his hands were shaking, and the confident, slightly annoyed expression he'd worn earlier was gone, replaced by a haunted look. He didn't say much at first. He just sat down, running a hand through his hair. Finally, he looked at her and said, his voice quiet and strained, "Let's rent a car." He didn't need to explain why. Elena knew. Something had happened on his ride, something that had shaken him to his core. They didn't talk about it. They just packed up their things, found a local car rental agency, and picked up a small sedan. The moment Elena sat in the passenger seat of that rental car, a strange thing happened. The crushing weight on her chest lifted, The feeling of dread, the constant hum of anxiety that had plagued her all day, just evaporated. It was like a switch had been flipped. She could breathe again. The rest of the vacation passed in a blur. They drove the rental car, exploring the towns and scenery, but the easy joy of the trip was gone. There was an unspoken tension between them, the memory of that morning hanging in the air. At the end of their trip, it was time to head home. They returned the rental car and got back into their RV, with the motorcycle still safely towed behind them. They set off on Interstate 87 South, heading back toward their regular lives. The afternoon sun was bright, and the traffic was light. It was a smooth, uneventful drive. For a few hours, it felt like things might be getting back to normal. The strange premonition, the fear, it all started to feel like a distant, weird dream. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, with no warning, an 18-wheeler truck on the northbound side of the highway, the opposite side of the road, began to swerve violently. It was like watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. The truck careened out of its lane, ripped straight through the grassy median separating the north and southbound traffic, and shot directly across their path. It was a massive, speeding wall of metal, coming right for them. Mark, reacting on pure instinct, slammed on the brakes. The RV's tires screeched against the pavement as the huge vehicle skidded sideways. Elena braced for impact, squeezing her eyes shut, absolutely certain this was it. This was the moment they were going to die. Time seemed to stop. She could hear the roar of the truck's engine, the shriek of their own tires, the sickening sound of metal crunching somewhere behind them, and then silence. They missed the truck by inches. It had shot past their front bumper and continued across the highway, eventually crashing into the woods on the side of the road. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They just sat there, hearts pounding, the smell of burnt rubber filling the air. When they finally looked back, they saw what had happened. The motorcycle they had been towing, the very same one Elena had refused to get on, was completely obliterated. The force of the skidding RV had swung the trailer around, and the truck had smashed right through it. If they had been on that bike on any road at that moment, it was a thought too horrifying to complete. Later, as police and emergency services swarmed the scene, they learned the tragic truth. The driver of the 18-wheeler had suffered a massive, fatal heart attack at the wheel. He had lost control just moments before his truck crossed the highway. It was a freak accident, a one-in-a-million tragedy that nobody could have predicted. Nobody except Elena. As they sat on the side of the highway, wrapped in emergency blankets, Mark turned to her. His face was as white as a sheet. His voice was filled with an awe and terror she had never heard before. "You knew," he said, his voice cracking. "Somehow, you knew. You felt this coming." And Elena, her hands still shaking uncontrollably, finally admitted the terrifying thought that had been taking shape in her mind. Her premonition hadn't been wrong. She had seen it all. The truck, the swerving, the violent crash. She had felt it the moment it was meant to happen. The only thing she got wrong was the location. The universe, or fate, or whatever you want to call it, had its script written. The crash was always going to happen. But by refusing to get on that motorcycle, by changing their actions that day, it seemed fate hadn't been prevented. It had just shifted its target from their bodies to the bike itself. What do you think? Was it a coincidence? Or did Elena's powerful intuition genuinely alter their destiny, turning a fatal premonition into a terrifying close call? This story makes you wonder about those gut feelings we all get, those little whispers from somewhere beyond our understanding. Maybe, just maybe, they're worth listening to. Thank you so much for watching. If this story gave you chills, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. See you next time.